Most people who lose an account don't get caught by some clever detection trick. They get caught because a brand new account started acting like a brand new account that's in a hurry. And platforms have gotten very good at spotting that specific shape of behavior, long before anyone on the other end looks at it by hand. I run proxy infrastructure and cloud phones for multi-accounting work, and part of that job is testing anti-detect browsers, multilogin, GoLogin, Camelio, EdsPower, Dolphin NT, against real platforms to see what actually holds up under real use. Warming is the piece almost everyone underinvests in. People will spend hours picking the right fingerprint profile and maybe 5 minutes thinking about how the account is actually going to behave once it's live. And in my experience, behavior is usually what gets an account flagged first, not the fingerprint underneath it. Account warming just means letting a new account build up ordinary-looking activity before you put any real load on it. Log in, browse around, wait, come back the next day, browse a bit more, maybe follow a few accounts, or fill out a profile. No bulk actions on day one, no automation kicking in the moment the account exists. Platforms trust accounts that behave like a person still learning their way around a service, and they get suspicious fast of accounts that behave like a script that just got switched on and immediately knows exactly what it wants. The reason people skip this step usually isn't laziness, it's cost. Proxies and phone slots cost money whether you use them or not. So there's a pull toward putting an account to work the same day it's created, just to feel like the spend is justified. I get the instinct. I felt it running our own infrastructure. But an account that gets rushed into real activity in its first hour is exactly the pattern trust and safety systems are built to notice, and a ban in week 1 costs a lot more than a few idle days would have. Fresh accounts get scrutinized because trust and safety systems don't treat every account the same from the start, and there's a reason for that. A brand new account has no history to lean on, so it gets evaluated against baseline patterns instead. How fast it moves through onboarding, whether its first actions look exploratory or purposeful, whether the device and network signals match what's normal for a new user in that region. An account that fills out every field in 4 seconds and finishes onboarding faster than a human can read the screen is already an outlier before it's done anything else. Does it indone a messing pass or fail check that happens once at signup? It's a running score that shifts with every session, every login, every action, and it keeps updating for as long as the account exists. A low score doesn't necessarily mean an instant ban, and that surprises people. More often, it just means more friction. Extra verification prompts, rate limits on certain actions, shadow restrictions that quietly limit reach, or features that roll out slower than they would for an account with a clean history. Here's the part that trips people up the most. That score doesn't get reset by a clean fingerprint on its own. No matter how good the anti-detect setup is, a perfectly consistent browser fingerprint attached to an account that immediately sends 50 messages or follows 200 accounts in an hour still reads as abnormal because the behavioral signal and the technical signal get evaluated together, not as two separate checks where passing one clears the other. On the fingerprint side, browser fingerprinting works by collecting a set of properties: canvas rendering output, WebGLM parameters, installed fonts, audio stack behavior, screen and viewport dimensions, time zones, language headers, and combining all of it into a profile that stays stable for a given device over time. Anti-detect browsers exist to give each account its own consistent profile instead of leaking your real machine's fingerprint into every session, and to keep that profile the same across visits so the account doesn't look like it's logging in from a different device every single time you open it. Consistency is the part that actually matters most for warming specifically. If an account's fingerprint shifts between sessions, canvas output changes, fonts change, screen resolution changes, that alone can read as a sign of automation or account sharing, completely independent of anything else you did that session. So before you even start warming an account, the baseline requirement is the same profile, the same proxy exit, the same general session pattern every single time you touch it. That's table stakes, not a guarantee of anything, and none of these tools make an account undetectable, unbannable, or risk-free. What they do, when configured correctly, is remove the obvious tells that come from a leaking or inconsistent browser fingerprint. Fingerprint consistency doesn't help much on its own. if the IP behind it doesn't match the story the fingerprint is telling. A mobile-shaped fingerprint granted through a data center IP sitting on a hosting provider S is a mismatch that platforms can and do check for. And it's one of the easier signals to catch. This is a big part of why residential and mobile proxies matter more than raw IP count ever does. What's actually being evaluated is IP reputation, SN type, and whether the IP's geolocation lines up with the time zones and language settings sitting in the browser profile. Mobile proxies carry an extra property that's worth understanding on its own, and that's CGNet sharing. Real mobile carriers route large numbers of real subscribers through the same public IP using carrier-grade net, which is completely normal and expected behavior for how mobile networks are built. I see it constantly on the carrier side of our own infrastructure. That means a mobile IP carrying traffic from multiple accounts isn't automatically suspicious the way the same pattern on a data center IP would be, because a platform seeing shared traffic on a known mobile range is seeing exactly what a real carrier looks like. That's a structural fact about mobile networks, not a trick or a loophole, and it doesn't mean any given mobile IP is automatically clean. IP reputation still gets burned by abuse regardless of what type of IP it started as. A mobile IP that's been run through hundreds of low-quality signups will earn a bad reputation just as surely as a data center one does. This is where most warming attempts actually fail. And honestly, it has nothing to do with fingerprints or proxies at all. Behavioral signals include session length, the time between actions, mouse movement and scroll patterns, typing cadence in text fields, and the order in which someone interacts with a brand new interface they've never seen before. A real person exploring an app for the first time reads things, pauses, backtracks when they click the wrong thing, and does a handful of actions before logging off. A script fills every field instantly and executes actions at a uniform interval, and that uniformity, more than any single action, is what stands out. A realistic ramp generally looks like short sessions early on, actions spaced out over time rather than batched together, and account activity that increases gradually over days rather than jumping straight into full usage on day 2. It also means not touching every account in a batch on the exact same schedule, since identical timing across a group of accounts is itself a pattern that stands out just as much as any single account's behavior does. None of this is platform-specific instruction on how to defeat a particular detection system. It's just what ordinary usage looks like next to automated usage, and that logic holds whether you're warming one account or coordinating a much larger batch of them. An anti-detect browser's actual job is to stop your own infrastructure from being the reason an account looks suspicious. No fingerprint leaks back to your real device. No proxy leaks mid-session. No fingerprint collisions between separate accounts sharing the same machine. That's a real and genuinely useful job, and it's not nothing. What it doesn't do is manage behavior for you, and that's the mistake I see most often. Every tool I've tested, multilogin, gologin, Cameleo, adds power, Dolphin NT, gives you profile isolation and fingerprint control, and the meaningful differences between them show up in how granular that control is and how the profiles hold up under close inspection, not in whether any of them can guarantee an outcome on a given platform. I haven't run controlled side-by-side ban rate tests that I'm prepared to put actual numbers on, so I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to sound more definitive. What I can say from hands-on use running these profiles day-to-day against real platforms is that profile isolation quality varies enough between these tools that it's worth testing against the specific platform you actually care about before you commit budget and time to one of them. Automation scheduling, action pacing, and the shape of a warming curve are typically handled outside the anti-detect browser entirely, whether that's manual usage session by session or separate tooling built for that specific purpose. Treating the browser as the whole solution is a mistake I see constantly, and it's an understandable one because the browser is the part that's visible and configurable. It solves the technical fingerprint problem cleanly, and it leaves the behavioral problem completely untouched sitting right next to it. Warming an account well means the technical layer and the behavioral layer both look ordinary at the same time, not one covering for the other. That's a stable fingerprint sitting on a proxy that actually matches its own story, used the way a real new user would use it, for roughly as long as a real new user would take to become an established one on that platform. Skipping any single one of those pieces doesn't just weaken the account on its own. It can actively undermine the other two as well. A mismatched IP or a robotic, uniform action pattern draws scrutiny toward a fingerprint that would otherwise have held up just fine on its own. So the three layers aren't independent, they're graded as one picture. I've seen setups where every individual piece looked reasonable in isolation, the fingerprint was clean, the proxy was decent, and the account still got flagged early, purely because the activity pattern gave the whole thing away. None of this makes an account safe, unbannable, or guaranteed to survive scrutiny over time. And I want to be straight about that instead of selling you a cleaner story. Detection systems change on their own schedule, and what reads as normal behavior today can get flagged tomorrow, if enough accounts start behaving the exact same normal way at once. Anyone telling you a specific browser or a specific proxy setup removes that risk entirely isn't being straight with you. Full stop. What we actually cover on this channel is how these systems work under the hood. The scoring, the fingerprinting, the network layer, the behavioral layer, so you can make an informed call about your own setup instead of leaning on somebody else's guarantee that was never going to hold up anyway. I test these browsers on real multi-account setups, so the written reviews and the picks I actually trust are all at antidetectreview.org. Full written reviews and tested picks at antidetectreview.org. And if this kind of hands-on breakdown is useful to you, go ahead and subscribe for more of it.